All right, let's get into it. Today, we're diving deep into the latest shareholder letter from Block. You know, the fintech giant behind both Square and Cash App. And believe me, they just dropped some absolutely massive numbers. So we're going to break down exactly how they pulled off this billion-dollar quarter.
Okay, but before we jump into the juicy stuff, just a quick heads up. Everything we're talking about today is purely for educational purposes. We're pulling all this straight from Block's public financial documents. So remember, this is not financial advice. Please, always do your own research.
So let's get right to the big question on everyone's mind. How on earth did the company that started with that tiny little white credit card reader transform into a financial powerhouse? I mean, we're talking over $10 billion in gross profit in just 1 year. Well, the answer really comes down to two incredibly powerful ecosystems that are getting more and more connected.
And here it is, the big headline number. In 2025, Block pulled in a staggering $10.36 billion in gross profit. I mean, wow. That's a 17% jump from the year before. And listen, for a company this big, that's not just steady growth, that is a massive leap. So you've got to ask, where did all that cash come from? So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with their overall performance. Then we'll look inside the Cash App engine and at Square's global expansion. After that, we'll get into the real drivers behind the growth and wrap up with a peek at Block's plan for the future. Let's do it.
All right, first things first, let's really put that impressive 2025 performance under the microscope.
You can really see the scale of that growth right here. I mean, jumping from just under $9 billion to over $10 billion, that's a huge leap in only 12 months. So the really crucial question becomes, where, specifically, did that profit come from?
And here's the breakdown for you. Cash App is the undisputed king here, right? It's bringing in over 60% of the gross profit. That's $6.34 billion. Of course, the OG seller business, Square, is still a total beast, contributing almost $4 billion. So you've got these two twin engines just pushing the whole company forward. Let's figure out what's making that bigger engine, Cash App, run so incredibly hot.
Okay, next up, we're going deep inside that Cash App growth engine.
If you need just one number to really get a feel for Cash App's momentum, this is it. 33%. In just the last 3 months of 2025, its gross profit shot up by a massive 33% compared to the year before. I mean, that's an incredible surge of growth right at the end of the year. Now you can see that surge right here, quarter by quarter. You can just trace that steady climb all year, and then, boom, a record $1.83 billion in gross profit in Q4 alone. Now what's really interesting to me is digging into what's actually fueling this incredible ride. And spoiler alert, it's not just one thing.
Nope, it's a whole mix of powerful financial tools. Block is telling us the growth is really being pushed by its lending products, stuff like Cash App Borrow and their buy now, pay later options. The Cash App card is still a huge hit. But here's the really crucial part. They're getting more and more people to use Cash App like it's their main bank account, what they call primary banking actives. Think direct deposits, paying bills, the whole shebang.
All right, let's switch gears for a second and talk about Block's other major player, Square, and how it's expanding across the globe.
So Square's growth in Q4 was a solid 7% year over year. And I know what you're thinking. Well, that's not the 33% we just saw from Cash App, but don't let that number fool you for a second. We're talking about 7% growth on top of an absolutely enormous base. Yeah, to put that 7% into perspective for you, just think about this. In only the last 3 months of the year, Square processed $65 billion in payments for its sellers. That is just an insane amount of money changing hands. It gives you a sense of the scale we're dealing with. But the really compelling part of Square's story isn't just the huge volume. It's where that volume is coming from. And this is where it gets really interesting. This is the key to Square's future. While the US market grew at that solid 7%, its international payment volume absolutely exploded, up 24%. This tells you everything you need to know. Their global expansion strategy, it is paying off big time.
So, we've seen the what for both Cash App and Square. But now let's get to the why. Let's look at the specific business drivers that Block themselves use to measure how things are going.
So Block likes to break its whole complex business down into 3 main buckets. It makes it easier to follow. And if we see how each of those performed, we get a really clear picture of the company's overall health.
And here are the numbers. So you've got commerce enablement. That's basically the core Square business. It grew a very healthy 11%. The Bitcoin ecosystem, that's up 10%. But just look at that top line. Financial solutions grew by a jaw-dropping 51% year over year. I mean, 51%. That is without a doubt the single biggest growth engine for the entire company right now.
So what do these fancy categories actually mean? Well, financial solutions is pretty much all about Cash App's lending products. That's what's behind that spectacular 51% growth. And that 10% pop in the Bitcoin ecosystem, that's coming from them actually shipping their new proto-Bitcoin mining rigs. It just goes to show you how they're placing these diversified bets on what the future of finance might look like.
Okay, so that brings us to the big finale. What does all this mean for the future? Where does Block go from here? Let's take a look at their own blueprint.
Well, the company has actually laid out 4 really clear financial goals. They want profitable growth, they want to hold on to the profit they make, and they want to stick to something called the Rule of 40. That's basically a fancy way of saying their growth rate and profit margin added together should be over 40%. It's a key benchmark for healthy tech companies. And of course, creating value for shareholders. All this tells you their recent success is no accident. It's part of a very deliberate strategy.
But honestly, the most exciting part of their future plan might just be this right here. This quote from their shareholder letter, it signals a huge strategic shift. They are pushing hard into artificial intelligence. The goal is to make their apps less about you telling them what to do and more about them predicting what you need. Think of it as a proactive financial assistant. We're already seeing this with tools like MoneyBot and Cash App and AI features for sellers on Square.
And that really leaves us with a fascinating final question, doesn't it? As Block keeps pushing deeper and deeper into AI with tools like MoneyBot, are we watching them build a future where their two ecosystems merge into the only financial tool you'll ever need? One that doesn't just hold your money, but actually anticipates what you're going to do with it. It really seems like that's the ultimate endgame.
And that's our breakdown for today. Hey, if you found this useful, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more explainers just like this one. Thanks for watching.